The Green movement also arrived at the tail end of the New Left's emergence. The New Left drew inspiration from the radical politics of the Black Panther Party, rejected the paternalism of the establishment, and sought societal transformation through social activism. The radical tactics of Greenpeace best embodied the New Left's influence on environmentalism and helped forge the connection between green and the environment in the public's mind. Rex Weiler, one of the activists on Greenpeace's first whaling mission, said of the organization, quote, "We wanted to do something so outrageous and visual and radical at the time that we would help wake up the planet to the whole ecology movement. We weren't working for Greenpeace, we were working for Mother Earth," end quote. The visual and radical tactics of the group generated worldwide media attention. In regards to the radical branding of Greenpeace, Tom Horton wrote in an article for Rolling Stone magazine, quote, "Greenpeace was scarcely the only group trying to stop international whaling. At least 20 other organizations existed, and many, like Project Jonah, had been working diligently and effectively long before the upstart's transcendent mind bomb hit the evening news with Walter Cronkite. Today, it would make an interesting trivia question: name another group besides Greenpeace that works to save whales," end quote. The transcendent mind bomb Horton referred to was footage of a Russian whaling vessel launching a harpoon at a whale and narrowly missing a Greenpeace activist. Greenpeace's radical tactics were later picked up and expanded upon by Earth First and Earth Liberation Front. While the environmental and green movements share a common cultural history, tactics are what distinguish the two. Mainstream environmentalism works within the system to effect change, while green, true to the spirit of the New Left, agitated for changes to the system itself. With its commitment to social justice, grassroots democracy, and nonviolence, the early green movement has more in common historically with the civil rights and feminist movements than with mainstream environmentalism. Green also advocates a personal ethical responsibility toward all living things on the planet and an equitable existence for all. Parallel to early green movement actions was the emerging political dimension of green, capital G. The 1970s and 80s saw a rise globally in environmentally motivated political parties, such as the Chipko Andalan or Hug the Trees movement in India, the Green Belt movement in Kenya, and the influential German Green Party, or Die Grünen, among many others, with each party addressing issues specific to its bioregion. By the early 80s, these groups began adopting the name Green, capital G, and now function as a global political party. Beyond a shared attachment to the environment, it becomes increasingly clear that the recent market-driven and advertising-enforced green has little, if anything, to do with the social formation and political dimensions of green. An early indicator of the current green appeared in the introduction to the Green Consumer Guide, which was released in the UK in 1988 and reached the top of bestseller lists and was reprinted 14 times the year it was published. The guide was geared explicitly toward baby boomers, who they refer to as the first environmental generation, and said of them, quote, "For these consumers, the choice is between different brands of commercially produced goods, not between consumerism and non-consumerism. In today's consumer-oriented society, the high-spending green consumer can pack more environmental punch than almost anyone else," end quote. Retiring street protests for pocketbook activism, the notion of voting with your dollars is heard again and again in relation to the new green. At the West Coast Green Conference, right before the November 2006 midterm elections, the conference host said in his introduction for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., "Your vote in elections is one thing, but your biggest vote is where you put your money." The new green replaces political power with purchasing power, a power the old green would argue is limited to those who have the means to go green. The 80s also saw shifts in major environmental organizations' priorities in response to the Reagan administration's impending environmental deregulations. As a symbolic harbinger of events to come, one of the very first things President Ronald Reagan did when he took office was remove solar panels that were placed on the White House roof by Jimmy Carter. That was like on his top 3 list of things to do. The Group of 10, which consisted of the Sierra Club, National Audubon Society, Wilderness Society, and other top environmental organizations, began meeting at the start of the Reagan administration to discuss ways to counteract the president's anti-environmental policies. Within the decade, these same organizations were meeting with corporate representatives to help companies such as DuPont and Exxon draft their environmental policies, paving the way for corporate greenwashing. In 1988, Time magazine departed from its usual selection of Man of the Year, instead naming Earth as Planet of the Year. The issue's cover features a globe covered in plastic, wrapped with twine, and sitting on an oil-slicked beach. Underneath the globe, it says, "Endangered Earth." The following summer, hypodermic needles and syringes started washing up on beaches in New York and New Jersey. The ozone hole had been discovered, and the term greenhouse effect was entering the mainstream. Within the year, the Time cover proved prescient with news of the Exxon Valdez spill in March of 1989. The harmful effect on the planet from our way of life was confirmed. The Time cover may also have been partially responsible for ushering in what environmentalists held as the green decade, or the environmental decade of the 90s. While green started appearing in relation to the environment in mainstream press then, it didn't catch on at a broader level until the past few years. I've lost track of all the things I've seen green applied to since completing my thesis 2 years ago. Everyone has jumped on the green bandwagon and is trying to figure out a way to cash in on the trend. While I was once cynical about this, I have come to recognize that everything is necessary in order to slow down the rate of environmental degradation. We have reached a point where it's no longer possible to fight global warming. It's here. The best we can do is learn how to adapt to the conditions it introduces. German Green Party co-founder Petra Kelly wrote that the Green Party values of nonviolence, ecology, social justice, and grassroots democracy are inseparable, and that, quote, "green politics requires us to be both tender and subversive," end quote. And I like that quote in this context because I think artists, more than anyone, are skilled at being both tender and subversive. But I will resist from concluding this talk by making suggestions about what people should do. In fact, when it comes to protecting the environment, often the best thing to do is nothing. Thanks.